House on the Prairie. Today's video is gonna be a book review on the books that I've read so far. The first book I want to review is By the Shores of Silver Lake by Laura Ingalls Wilder. If you were alive, you probably know about the Little House on the Prairie, because the concept of living on your own homestead and with horses and barns is still kind of like a thing that in America still is intact into society. I'm talking about like the South and Texas. They still kind of live by the concepts of Old Town Road. With that being said, this book is based on the 1800s, which is only 200 years ago, which is like crazy to think about. 200 years is like nothing. That's like 3 or 4 grandmothers that you have and that I have. So we could have had a generation where we lived in Little House on the Prairie. Isn't that cool? I like to read. I like that I read this book and I took that. Laura wrote it as each chapter, like you think it's a 300-page book, you're like, oh my god, that's like too much. But when you read it, you understand that she's spacing it and pacing it, and every chapter builds the feeling of isolation, solitude, contentment. Like everything was needed. This book in particular, I think it's the 4th or the 3rd book in the series. It had a lot of singing, so there's a lot of passages of like songs, and you're like, okay, but it gives you the tone that after you're done building your house and living your life, you get to sit down with your family and play the fiddle and make up songs. It's very like solitude. But from reading these, I've taken the notion and tradition of living every day as if you're living your little house on the prairie, and not to take your life so seriously, which like I tend to do. But when you have 4 layers of loose powder, a pink wig, and a cowboy hat from the Halloween store, you can't really take yourself too seriously. I'm trying to find a song, like over here. There's like a lot of like songs in throughout of it, which is cool because you get to like see the language of how people used to talk and how demure or not demure they used to talk, and how the girls would be kept away from the public and the society and from men in particular so they can grow up a certain way. It's very like kind of nurture versus nature, which is like probably why I'm sitting here with a pink wig talking to you right now. Do you think I am a product of nurture or nature? I think nature from growing around so many women, but nurture from own doing because I'm an only child. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm an only child. I mean, I'm talking to you on the internet, on a website that you post yourself to. Can it get more only child than that? Okay. I wonder if Bethany Moda was only child. I wonder. Because the way she done YouTube was very, very only child. And she used to live only an hour and a half away from me. Isn't that pretty crazy? Like, she's California. I think she was Fresno or Manteca. I think she's Fresno. Quote me if I'm wrong, but... And you could see what she's done with her YouTube. She branched out to movies, clothing lines, and she still does YouTube now, and it's cool to watch her YouTube videos from 10 years ago because they're now nostalgic. The way of morning routines, high saturation videos. She came off as perfect, which is very like Virgo midheaven, which I think she has. Okay, anyways, back to Little House on the Prairie. So what got me into reading this book is that I got this book first. I got this book. Look at that lavender color. This was my inspiration. Lavender here for lavender back there. But first I got this book because it was talking about Laura and the dog. And oh my god, if you need to read this book. This book came before this one, but like it was made between the one that came before this one and this one. But this one is, if you're a dog lover, you have to read books that are written around the thesis of a relationship between a human and a dog. This is what it was. Actually, I read Marley and Me first, and that's why I got to this one. I don't know why I went this way. Like, I think I was watching like Little House on the Prairie on YouTube and diving into the actors. Did you know it was a TV show first? Highly successful TV show, and you know why? Like, because it slows you down to look at a fantasy world that wasn't fantasy, because we actually lived through it as a consensus. I don't think that's the word. I don't think consciousness is the word either. Something with the C. As a culture, we get to look at it as if it's fantasy, but maybe something inside us recognizes it as that was an actual way to live and a viable way to live. I also read this book, and this book was talking about 800 years in the future and how we went backwards in our thoughts and disowned science, fact, and mentalness as devil and as evil. So we actually went backwards into culturalizing, which is like kind of like this. I think this is why this is popular today. I don't know if it is. This is just what I ran into. But that being said, I would recommend you pick up any of these books and read it, because once you start, you might be a little bored, but then once you start like understanding the tone, you get to like slow down and realize how like you live such in a high speed society. But when we used to, I'm gonna say we used to because maybe we did live on our little house on the prairies, we took less things for granted, like food, like air, like where we live, our animals. Because especially food, because you couldn't be vegan in the 1800s. You would probably die. Isn't it so American to be vegan now? But if you were vegan back then, I think you would die, or you would be like a cow. And cows lived, so maybe you would live. But that was my review. I feel like I talked like 5% about this book, but I would recommend this book to you. More just the Little House on the Prairie series, because a major plot point that I loved about this book was that when you're talking and building a character, she was 12 turning 13. And you know how in America 13 is like your preteen, your first teenage year? Well, to signify that as a point in Laura's timeline, the author, she wrote her dog, spoiler alert, she wrote her dog dying, and that signified her adolescence dying and her growing up, because she's not going to have a friend with her anymore. And they were actually moving from one territory, moving west to a different territory, and the dog that was been there since the first book had gotten really old and tired and died, and the author used that imagery to portray growing up, which is really cool and really sad and really true. That was my favorite. That comes like in the beginning, so get ready for that. I'm trying to think of any other plot points that I loved about this book. I did like the pacing, the slowness, the understanding of values and morals, and how the beliefs of the 1800s can help us today too. Because we forgot about them. I know I forgot about them. And having a blind daughter, Mary, one of Laura's sisters in the book, makes you see the world that you live in today differently about a character that's blind. Isn't that like so ironic? How a blind character can make you see, and made everyone else around her family see for her and invite her in. I like this book. I also love all the little pictures that they... Okay, this is like not a good picture. All my vegans are crying. But you had to kill animals to eat them back then. And that idea of making your own hotel, like, so crazy. And community was more... I think it's just nostalgic. That being said, if you're my teacher from the 4th grade that I stole the whole book series of this from for her little library in the back, please don't be watching this video and please don't sue me. I bought this book, so that makes up for me stealing your collection in the back of your classroom. Does anyone else still have books that they borrowed and read at home from school, but they kept them? If you do, go pull them out and read them, because I noticed that the grade level books, like 4th, 5th, 6th grade, are like the best books. But that was my review of these 2 books. Bye.